Child Protection in Iowa is brought to you by Vocal Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can watch our program on Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Again, it's repeated on Wednesday evening at 9:30, all on Mediacom Cable Channel 15. You can email us at vocaliowa@mchsi.com. My phone number here in Des Moines is area code 515-276-3956, and John's number is 515-282-2672. My name is Don Burgmaier, and with me at the controls is my co-host,
John Harvey, and welcome to the CPI report. That's Child Protection in Iowa. Issues regarding children, particularly in families where there's been false allegations raised by the Department of Human Services and from other sources as well. We've created a system that has gone awry, a noble system gone wrong. And one of these days I'll be putting together a series of statements regarding what has happened to our system. Certainly it is a noble system to watch out for children and to minimize, if at all possible, safety risks. As it stands right now, we are plowing hundreds of thousands of dollars up into the millions of dollars to look after these public policy issues of child abuse. And we have seen in the month of April an enormous campaign to let everybody know that there's such a thing as child abuse. And we've seen stories where they've dug up stories from the past and presented them in order to curry some favor with the public. And we're going to be asking a lot of questions. For an example, why do we put such a tremendous amount of interest and effort in child abuse called child sexual abuse when that amounts to only a tiny percentage of the total number of cases? Certainly we shouldn't leave that out of the picture as far as studying it or making provisions for safety, but it seems as though all we can think of is child sexual abuse. I think one reason why is that those topic areas are contain hot button words, and they help the organization to swell to much greater size than it would otherwise have grown to. So it's a crying shame that we have to match our rhetoric, match our content to what we want in terms of expansion, rather than to match it to what reality tells us is the case. I'll give you another example of what you might be looking for in the report that I'm going to put together. And that is, we know that the subject of stranger danger is an important one to teach children. Is it terribly important if only a tiny percentage of the problem of abductions is from strangers? Is it more important that we recognize what reality tells us and abide by by those rules, work within that set of terminology, instead of barking up the wrong tree and having all kinds of programs that are suited best to stranger danger, when stranger danger is not prevalent as a safety hazard for children. That's not to say it never would happen, but shouldn't we measure our public policy and our efforts and our expenditure of funds in areas where it really makes sense? Does it make sense that we are spending over $1 million on protection programs? You might say, well, it's a good idea to keep children safe. Now, if your argument is correct, and that in order to keep children safe, then what we should be looking at when we spend over $1 million each year of taxpayers' funds, we should be looking at a drop in the incidence of child abuse across the state. In fact, the more money we put into child abuse prevention programs, the greater the number of cases that arise. Now, why might that be? It might be that when you start distributing money to county councils all over the state, then you may be putting greater and greater pressure on families to report things that have no business being reported. And Terrance Walker was making a comment one time that it seems as though the number of cases we have for neglect is far greater than the number of any of the other cases, other category of cases. And there are other categories such as physical abuse and sexual abuse. We know that sexual abuse amounts to only a tiny percentage of the total. Physical abuse requires some medical backup or evidence of physical abuse. Although I've seen that definition badly misused as well. Sometimes a description of abuse 3 or 4 years ago, for which there is no current evidence, can be used as evidence. For instance, if a 16-year-old says that father wouldn't let her out of the house to go to the concert, and in doing so hurt her ribs, well, nobody is going to bother to check her ribs. Simply her statement is sufficient to charge that parent with child abuse, simply because she says her ribs hurt. And I've heard all kinds of stories along this line. One of the sad things about the child protection system is that everybody looks at it and knows just how powerful it is to have a charge launched on somebody, and they use it not for the purpose of protecting the child, but they use it for the purpose of gaining some advantage not otherwise available in some other venue. It is a beautiful charge to throw, particularly sexual abuse, in divorce cases. In fact, 2/3 of all cases involve divorce or custody issues. Now, this means that government has to have a social worker jump in a car and go out and check every single one of those if it's turned in by a mandatory reporter. That is a tremendous waste. We need to become focused and businesslike in the way we handle these things with respect to child abuse. And we're not doing that as of now. It's time that we become accustomed to doing things businesslike, even though it's government run. We can't afford the kind of protection that should be available for children if we're going to waste our time and effort on the kinds of things that are happening in today's world. And you've had a good example here during the month of April, in which people have turned in all kinds of reports, had all kinds of specials on television, and very little believable content. Now, we can have all kinds of things happening to children that is sad, but those that many of those things do not rise to child abuse. And in fact, across the nation, the definitions for child abuse are not very well coordinated. So when you try to match or compare apples with oranges from one state to another, if they don't have the same definitions, um, uh, the comparisons make it very difficult. Another question that arises when people ask us about our work, about our research into these areas, we'll say just how many of those cases are really true cases. Well, it's almost impossible for us as third parties to step into a case and to know enough about it to make a reasonable guess as to whether uh, child abuse actually took place. The reason why, in Terrance's view, there were a lot of neglect cases is because the definitions are so poorly written that any debate between a social worker and a parent regarding uh, parental responsibilities or parental interaction with the child, in which there is a disagreement between the social worker and the parent, that can be very quickly written up as a child abuse report. Then they come in and do their assessments, in which they ask questions that have nothing to do with the current child abuse investigation underway. They need that for future reference when the next child abuse case comes in. And then we have the government stepping in and bringing up several measures which show whether or not we are doing a successful job in our child protection issues. Now, here's what happens. One of those major significant milestones is if the child is re-abused. It means that once the child is found to be an abused child, does the efficiency of the department does it rise to a level where that doesn't happen again? Well, let me tell you how they can arrange for that not to happen again. It really doesn't make any difference whether it happens again or not if the DHS decides not to report it. So they can fudge with those figures all they want. And I am very skeptical. And I think skepticism is a wise attribute for people to exercise when looking at statistics with respect to child abuse. The article on NBC News just recently, here again, April, because April is the month to celebrate. April is the month to bring awareness of child abuse. Every year, hundreds and thousands of children are abused and neglected in the United States. Child welfare specialists say that it is an epidemic caused by mental illness, drug addiction, and poverty. Maybe so, maybe not. I doubt that you could make any kind of sweeping statement like that with any background whatsoever. But ABC doesn't always wait for a credible background in writing their stories. A new report by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services found that an estimated 1,500 children in the United States die from abuse or neglect in 2003, and the majority of them were under the age of 4. It is truly an epidemic. Well, they've used this word epidemic for a number of years, said Shea Bilchik, president and chief executive of the Child Welfare League of America. By the way, that Child Welfare League of America came into Iowa and and studied the DHS, found them to be a good agency. I wonder why. Well, it's because the DHS, no doubt, belongs to the Child Welfare League. We have seen a tremendous increase over the last 20 years. States have the primary responsibility for dealing with abused children. Many have been unable to keep pace with the number of cases despite increases in funding from federal government. In other words, the greater the funding, the greater the number of cases. Um, Indiana is in crisis. Indiana is an example of a state in crisis. There are approximately 61,000 phone calls from abused and neglected uh, children every year that come over into our department, said Jim Payne, director of the Indiana Department of Child Services. Payne was appointed to overhaul the state's child protective services. Indiana's child welfare system is in a disarray that the federal government says it is withholding millions of dollars in funding until the state makes significant improvements in its services. Last year alone, Indiana, see, they don't lie fast enough. Iowa knows how to lie their way through statistics fast enough to stay out of the government's way. Last year alone in Indiana, 19 children who were already known to social workers died of abuse and neglect. Susan Swain is an Indiana social worker who routinely carries more than 50 cases at a time, nearly 3 times the recommended number. I mean, I just feel like I can never get ahead, Swain said. Many social workers say that they are stunned by an increase in abuse in the middle class, putting additional strain on a system already under pressure.
Which class, John?
This says the middle class. I don't know whether I'm part of the middle class or not. Um, it it covers it covers across the socioeconomic spectrum, Bilchek said. So it's just about as impoverished. Um, it isn't just about impoverished families. In other words, it isn't just the poor families we're going after. Now we can go after the middle class families.
Well, now they got more money, right?
Right. That's right.
So they can afford to.
That's right.
And they don't want to come after the rich families because they can hire attorneys and clear their name.
Absolutely correct.
So that's a waste of time and energy on their part.
Swain was recently sent to a suburban Indianapolis neighborhood to remove 2 pregnant teenage girls from their parents who were suspected of neglect. One of the pregnant children is on bed rest and doesn't even have a bed in the home, and she hasn't been going to school for 4 months, says Swain. And the other child hasn't been going to school at all this year. See, they're trying to get into this truancy business because they know the truancy officers in the Department of Education aren't doing their job. So DHS decided that they'll take over this truancy business because it's a social concern. Don?
John, can you quote me how many families that you know of on statistics in Iowa that do not send their children to school?
Have no idea.
That's through the homeschooling issue?
Have no idea.
You got an idea of percentage, don't you?
There's approximately somewhere between 1 million and 2 million across the nation
Okay.
that don't send their children to school, but that has nothing to do with what they're saying here. They want to get in and interfere and use where the child is going to school as a part of this whole thing. And
is that a statewide initiative or is that national?
this is
Iowa.
this is Indiana.
Oh, Indiana.
Yeah.
I was gonna say because I know I was just reading over some news from nationwide. They have a bill called HR 1528, and this was actually being proposed by Congress right now, and it targets parents with mandatory sentences if they witness their children using or selling drugs and do not turn them in. So, if you have a parent, if you have a child out there that is using or selling drugs and you don't rat on your child, then, that bill proposes that you go to jail and you have a mandatory minimum. So, this is where we're getting to with all these too much legislation, I think, too much time on their hands, too many trips. You seen the big article or a bunch of news think this past week about how they're making all these trips, the congressional people, taking trips everywhere,
Paid for by what?
paid for by your money, and yet and still they want to lock everybody else up
That's
while
right.
they're taking trips.
That's absolutely right. There has been, I shouldn't say that the officials have been totally silent on this business of education, because originally when the homeschool law came in, there was a lot of interest in making truancy against the law. In other words, they could actually pull your child in as a child in need of assistance, remove that child from the parent because the parents didn't give the proper attention to education
Through the public school.
through the government school. So if you don't abide by the school rules, you could lose your children. In the state of Kentucky, they were successful in getting that passed. So truancy in Kentucky is an offense which is indictable by I shouldn't say indictable. It's an offense by which the juvenile courts can take jurisdiction over the child and his family, which can spell out disaster in any case. And I don't think they're going to give up on it in Iowa simply because Iowa didn't vote for it. They're going to keep on after it, and it's one of the things that is written in the current manuals for the Department of Human Services to determine whether or not the child is in school. They tried at one time to use something called Learn Fair. Learn Fair says that if your child doesn't go to school, mother doesn't get her welfare check. And which meant that they basically had to send a social worker to the school to check on attendance to see if mom could get her welfare check. They tried that in Wisconsin. I don't know if it worked in Wisconsin or not, but it wasn't until, I believe, last year that they finally scrapped the whole idea. It doesn't have to make sense for the General Assembly to pass something like this at the urging of these welfare jokers who want to get in and pass these silly laws simply because we have some families that are dysfunctional families, and we're going to pass laws that make it difficult for all the rest of the Iowans. I think it's a shame that we run our government that way.
It usually emanates from a few elite individuals who, for the most part have lived a privileged lifestyle, and they cannot see how some people could subsist off of public assistance. And, hey, the society is creating people that are on public assistance. So, it really makes no sense to want to further sanction someone that's on public assistance and make them jump through further hoops and hurdles just to make their lives harder, so that these people that are so elite can feel good about themselves, and trying to tell people, hey, pull yourself up from the bootstrap and
Correct.
be like us, and you shouldn't be on food stamps anyway. I think they got food stamp card nowadays.
Yeah, they don't call it food stamps now.
No,
Now
those
they
are the
call
old
it
school.
Food Assistance Program.
There you go.
TAP, Food Assistance Program. So we're renaming everything, it seems like. And by the way, we reported last week just how well that is doing. The food assistance program has expanded, and of course, whenever they have a program like this, it means that they can get into more homes and to offer more services, and they can keep their eyes out in case there's another child abuse case that they can possibly report on. Because this means for all those new child abuse reports means they can hire more staff, they can fund more programs, they can do all kinds of silly things with taxpayers' money, and they can bamboozle us into believing that somewhere under all those confidential blankets that they have around them, that they are actually doing something for the boys and girls of the state of Iowa. I don't believe they are. I don't believe that there is that much need. In fact, the 61,000 phone calls, when you compare that to the population of the state of Indiana, doesn't match anywhere close to the number of phone calls we're getting in Iowa when you compare that to Iowa's population. So I think it's one in something like 79 in Iowa, but it's 1 in 99 in Indiana, so that for every 99 people, there's one phone call. Well, be that as it may, it looks as though a lot of this stuff is done for the purpose of expansion of the organization, to make certain that the jobs remain high paid and secure. Now, what does that have to do with child protection? How does that keep a child protected? And just how far can we go to make sure that a child is protected? It seems strange to me that when that child exits the womb, there are all kinds of inoculations we give that child in order to maintain some kind of level of safety, health safety for the child. We make certain that when that child gets out of the stroller and gets into some other fun device, that he has a helmet. We make certain that when he gets his inline skates, that he has knee pads, and we equip him with all kinds of safety devices, so he doesn't get his little knees crumbed up one way or another. However, when that child becomes 13 and 14 years old, we don't care who they run around with, who they have sex with. We simply throw away all of our common sense with respect to safety. How is it that parents can do that? They can put a helmet on a 2-year-old, but they can't watch their 13-year-old. I think that's there's some kind of mismanagement there somewhere, and I'm not sure that we can blame it all on parents. I think they're seeing a lot of this outgrowth of this kind of philosophy in our government schools. Well, I want to finish up this article, try to wind it up. The 2 girls now are staying with their grandparents under state supervision. This is in the state of Indiana. They are part of a sea of children thought to be at risk around the country. Well, these children probably are at risk, and there probably are parents who don't give a rip about their children, but there's millions others whose children are being taken away from them, who care much for the children, and whose grandparents and aunts and uncles care for the children. And I've seen cases that I've come across where there's probably 18 or 20 people in the family to whom the child could be placed if there was some reason to investigate and to remove the child. But then they'll take the child and put them in a foster home. Why? Because then they can control the child. They can also can control, particularly if it's an older child, they can make certain that no one can get to that child before that child gets to court. So they can brainwash the child into testifying in any fashion that they please. Well, so much for the.
You said that they can brainwash the child in any way that they please. That a lot of parents can't comprehend that, John, but it's a proven fact that children can be manipulated and not even understand themselves what is happening. Isn't that correct, John?
Absolutely. I've seen children changed basically overnight by the DHS. And the DHS, by the way, when they move children from one home to another, they have a clothing allowance. So if the child is moved 6 times, he gets 6 clothing allowances of $200 at a time.
And they throw away the old clothes.
And they want to remove. Part of it is, to make the child feel good about going into a new situation. And so with that new situation comes new clothes. But I think part of it is a bribe.
Money is buying the love of those kids.
Correct. And whose money is that? Well, it's somewhere around $74 million we're plundering. And we really don't care because a lot of that is federal money. So, and
it all comes back to us, though.
By all means, because we're the ones that are going to have to.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how they tend to want to use federal money and not think about the fact that it's still all of our money.
Correct.
Yeah. You get a few bureaucrats in there that are bent on increasing their budgets and their salaries. That's all they're concerned about sometimes.
I've told the story before that I wanted to see some tapes that were made for social workers, teaching social workers, and the librarian at the Department of Human Services says, no, we don't have to give you those tapes because it wasn't made with tax money. And I said, oh, well, pray tell, what money did you use to pay for those tapes? She said, well, these are federal dollars. And so it took me about 3 minutes to go up to the director's office and said, look, I've asked to see tapes that were made at public expense, and I'm told that it isn't possible because it wasn't made with taxpayers' money. It was made with government money. And I said, where do you suppose those federal dollars came from? Well, it wasn't more than a few minutes until I had the materials in hand. I doubt now that I could even get a hold of those materials anymore. Well,
by what money are they paid for now, John?
Yeah, right. Well,
it's surely not the social workers' money.
Let's turn, before we run out of time here, let's turn to Terrance Walker with his court report. Terrance.
Okay, well, thank you. Appreciate it, John. Just wanted to give a shout out to our new audience in Council Bluffs as well. We're going to expand this statewide and hopefully nationwide one day.
Is it okay for Omaha people to watch the channel too?
Omaha's okay too.
On Cox Cable?
Even though we mainly deal with Iowa, but I mean some of the issues that we're talking about are nationwide, and since I'm the court guy and I talk about the court issues, I feel that.
Did you identify your name?
Oh, I'm Terrance Walker.
I did. Oh,
yeah.
Oh, John's taking credit for that. I missed that.
You must not be listening. You should turn to channel 15.
Yeah, but the big news nationwide here the past week was that the jail population, according to the Justice Department Bureau of Statistics, it increased from mid-2003 to mid-2004 increased by 48,452 prisoners, and that amounted to about a 3.3% increase in the state prison population. Actually, 1.3% state population. The federal prison population grew by 6.3%, and then that over the past 4 years, the average population of everybody incarcerated here in the United States grew by 932 people each week. That's 1,000 new people in jail, increasing. I believe the grand total was 2.1 million people here in the United States, which is really a bizarre statistic. Nationwide, or actually worldwide, we're the number one still in the rate of incarceration. And Dana Kaplan of the Center of Constitutional Rights in New York City said that the growth was caused by factors like increased arrest rates for low-level offenses, particularly in low-income neighborhoods where many residents can't meet bail, and also increased detention among non-citizen immigrants and a number of people with mental illness who were formerly residing in mental health facilities. And it's also interesting to note that while overall crime went down over the past dozen, or actually 10 years, we still are faced with higher and higher and higher incarceration rates. That means we have some very sadistic lawmakers out there that are either, I don't know if they're sadistic or if they're just trying to use their position and their stance on tough on crime to get elected. And the overall effect of this is that pretty soon everybody's family in this nation should be touched or should know about somebody that is in prison, and that's an abhorrent statistic. You have any take on that, John or Don? What's your
John,
comments?
pass it on to you.
Okay. Something here a little more local in Iowa. April 21st, I believe, the Iowa Supreme Court started to, or actually basically proclaimed that they're going to be using the new Iowa Rules of Professional Conduct, which are modeled after the ABA's model rules. They're basically going to get rid of these state local bar associations and lawyers associations that have been handling complaints about lawyers and stuff like this. And this should strike a chord with our people in Council Bluffs, being as how the Terry Harrington case was basically handled out of that area and was actually emanated, actually caused a lot of this stink to be raised up again into the public's eye with the Des Moines Register. The whole issue about ethical rules and the attorneys and the complaints against them, they've basically been handled by local bar associations who basically could be chummy, with their colleagues and just deny the validity of the complaint. And I believe it was Terry Harrington. Wasn't it Terry Harrington or was it Ann Danaher who was actually fought for his release after, almost 17 years?
The one that served a lengthy term in prison was Terry Harrington.
Okay.
The one that won his release after 25 years was Ann Danaher.
Okay. Yeah, I remember she fought for him, and she's a
not an attorney, not even a law clerk.
Yeah, she's a colleague of ours, I would say. But I was under the impression that she had filed a complaint against some of the attorneys in the matter, and that the local bar associations didn't really do anything about it. But this is supposed to spearhead a new set of rules. I mean, this is supposed to be a new set of rules to be handled by the Board of Ethics, which is basically put in place by the Iowa Supreme Court. and some of these local bar associations are not going to get the first say on these ethical complaints against prosecutors or lawyers, and that's a good thing. The bad thing is, and I've commented on this before it was actually put into place, is that they still want to farm out some of the local investigations involving these lawyers and attorneys to some of the local bar associations. So once again, we have a case of the Fox Garden Hen House. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The Board of Ethics does have the authority to investigate and not delegate their investigations to local bar associations over the lawyers. But who's to say that they won't? The also one of the other problems I find is that they're still keeping this board's process and procedures and their the details of the complaints basically confidential. So you basically have a public institution that operates in such a manner as when it comes to secrecy, as such a manner as the CIA or something like that. So we don't really know if they're going to do a good job or not. It sounds good, but there are a lot of things that sound good that aren't good. So we need to do some further pushing to try to get the Board of Ethics Board of Ethics that is actually more transparent. And you don't want to have something that is so sensitive, or not, I should say sensitive, but something that matters so much to us as the public officials that we have working for us, and the complaints against them, everything held secret. It just doesn't make any sense if we're going to come to a time in this country where we're going to have true justice. We got to get the people that are responsible, the gatekeepers of justice, the lawyers, the prosecutors, and the judges. We got to keep them in a under public scrutiny. Else, or else the gatekeepers, if they're not under public scrutiny, then they're not truly, in my opinion, held accountable. One other aspect of this that I really have beef with is that in Iowa, as in most states, they did a good thing, I guess, as a good gesture anyway, for implementing these new rules involving prosecutors and attorneys. However, they didn't do anything to have a separate board of ethics investigate judges and have them under the same sort of scrutiny. We've basically have the same situation that the prosecutors were in, that the judges are in. They basically have judges on these commissions, and they might have one layman, but it's basically attorneys, and it's a private, secret, confidential matter if you complain a judge here in Iowa with the Judicial Qualification Commission. So they took one step ahead, but for the judges did anyway, as far as trying to improve the integrity of the complaint process against lawyers and attorneys. But herein we still do not have a transparent mechanism to investigate judicial complaints. That's my whole take on that. And the other issue I was going to report on is the whole idea and notion. I think we have a system here in this country whereby judges have created a system to basically clog the courts. We hear complaints from various Iowa Supreme Court, whatever Supreme Court judges that are responsible for their recommendations on their budgets in their whole states or in their whatever various jurisdiction that they're in. We hear complaints all the time of how their caseloads are being increased, trifold, and things of that nature, and how they need to get pay raises, and how they need to have uh, court attendance so they don't have to take water out to the jurors. Uh, and I find all this laughable. Uh, we have a situation here in this country, and I'll just call it the judicial three-card Monte. You guys are familiar with three-card Monte? Okay. Well,
No.
three-card Monte is a game, and I've played it before. It's stacked against you. It's like basically usually it involves a street hustler, and they're out there on the corner, and they have three shells, and they have a ball underneath, and they've got the ball going back and forth, and they're moving the shell, and you have to pick the right shell to win. Well, in my analogy I'm going to make today, we have a lot of judges that are experts in this game, and they have created a situation thereby which is clogging the courts. I've encountered it in one of my cases that I've actually pursued. It was actually a case that's involved in the Iowa Supreme Court right now. Case number is 03-1173. The whole background, I won't get into the whole background of it, but I'm going to just briefly, concisely tell how they played the game of three-card Monte with me. Um, I had a case, it was a criminal case, it went against me back in 1995. There were some constitutional issues that I wished to pursue on appeal. However, the attorney that I had on the appeal, contrary to any sort of ethics, even the ethics that's promulgated today by the Iowa Supreme Court, did not communicate with me concerning the appeal and did not raise my issues on the appeal. The constitutional issues, those are. I subsequently, because the appeal was denied, I went to federal court. Well, the state's attorneys said, well, Mr. Walker has a revenue for relief or avenue for relief in the state courts. He could just go back to the state courts and get his conviction overturned on the procedure known as post-conviction relief in the state of Iowa. So what they did is they then in turn had me go to the state court. I go to the state court, and the state court basically says at the district court level that all the issues have been previously adjudicated. And this is where we're at this stage in the proceeding. We're actually in the Iowa Supreme Court once again to try to get to the bottom of this, because the state officials, the state attorneys, and the courts are basically saying two different things. They're saying that one, you can't go to the federal court because we have a relief in the state court. And then when you get back to the state court, they say that you don't have a avenue for relief because the issue has been previously adjudicated. Now, two of those things cannot be true at the same time. But yet, this is the game of three-card Monte. So, when you get into a judicial situation, and I'm sure you've probably heard of situations like that from your friends and family or associates, whereby at every avenue you're being told something different. Don't be surprised, because it's a game that goes on. I believe, Don, I think you had a situation where you had the same occurrence occur to you, didn't you?
Well,
If you care to share it.
what I'm thinking about is I filed an action in the district court here in Polk County, first part for 3rd day of January, I believe it was. And then I turned around and I wanted to expedite, because in the past I've been told that the courts love to expedite and get the case over with. So I asked the court to make a ruling based on all the paperwork that is filed, and this is against the state of Iowa. And the state of Iowa did not give any resistance to expediting it. And so the judge put out an order that he was going to make a ruling, unquote, based on the paperwork. He was going to make the ruling. And so I sat here and wait for a ruling. I asked the clerk of court if there's a ruling came down. No ruling came down. And finally, I went into the internet, and finally, they put up information on the internet saying case was closed. I go back down to the clerk of court. She says, no, the case is not closed. 2 days later, I guess it paid for me to go down to the clerk of court. I don't know what I did. All I did was ask questions. 2 days later, here came a ruling from the judge saying that he got a phone call, I guess, from I forgot what worker that was in the courthouse that controls hearings.
Baldwin, the court administrator.
Court administrator, thank you. And the message was that this case is just sitting here, and judge, you need to get it moving. So the judge put out an order based on that statement for everybody to file briefs. So I turned around and write back. I said, I've got the brief in there. And the and the state is happy with the process. I don't know if they're happy with it, but they're not complaining anyway. And so where are we here now? This is 1st of May. How many months has went by? February, March, April, May. 4 months. When the court already made an order that they were going to make a ruling a long time ago. So that's. I guess
It's
they just
crazy.
don't have enough time to handle all the cases. I'm not sure, Terrance.
Well,
What's
I think
going
it's
on?
a game.
Well, they're understaffed and overworked, Don.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's a guy that's in one of our legal discussion groups online that actually coined it, or actually put it into perspective really good when he said that he said the legal establishment has become more or less a game. It's not no longer based on truth and justice. It's all that's left is a game. What can you get away with as a lawyer? How much can I steal without getting caught? And that's what most lawyers and judges are thinking today. So, do you think that the government attorney actually believes their lines? You know, is there do you think that they believe both things at once? You can't believe both things at once. Either you're going to believe that one procedure is going to be followed or has to be followed, or the other procedure has to be followed. You can't just say, well, both of them are true, but it just seems to be that they want to be they want to take a different stand
Flexibility.
dependent on what the outcome will be. You see, I could have got the case heard and the conviction thrown out a long time ago in federal court had the state attorney said to the federal court that, yeah, everything has been adjudicated in the state court, so therefore you can go to federal court and have those issues reviewed. But no, they chose to say that they hadn't been adjudicated, but yet when I go back to the state court to get the issue adjudicated, they say, well, it has been adjudicated. So I just want to put this case number so people can actually see that. You can go to the website judicial.state.ia.us and look up this case, Terrance Walker versus the state of Iowa. That's actually me suing them. And this is a case number up there. There's two of them, 4-862, or you can also look it up under 0-1173. Now this preliminary opinion was filed by the Court of Appeals. They basically, not only are a lot of the judges good three-card Monte players, but they're good dancers. And I say that because the Iowa Court of Appeals danced all around the issue that I raised and jumped hoops to not even touch upon the issue, which is why I'm still pressing it in the Iowa Supreme Court today, which is due to be decided here on May 10th. So if you want to go on there online and check that case out, you'll read, if you can read between the lines and kind of see what they left out, Some of the stuff is kind of clear that what they left out because they didn't elaborate. But a couple of the things, which was my due process rule of lenity argument, was blatantly left out, though it was even raised clearly and specifically in the legal briefs. This is something that goes on all the time. So next week we're going to talk a little bit, I guess, about the Jeff Ragland case. Is something that is championed by Council Bluffs native and not lifelong resident, but for the most part, Council Bluffs resident John Hartog. And
Who was
we'll
from
get
Des
into
Moines
that.
also for a while.
And then we'll also get into the Crooked Gavel Awards. We're going to start awarding these judges that are doing these sort of things awards, and we'll send them a prize. Maybe we'll even send them a crooked gavel, since and you know the gavel is the thing that they pound. They're supposed to pound on the. They don't do that no more though.
They don't hit you in the head,
they
do they,
No,
Terrance?
they don't. I guess they hit you in the head with the stuff that doesn't make sense. In essence, folks, they basically Terry Scheibled me. They just took out my feeding tube and let me die a slow death. And you know, none of the judges want to come to my rescue. They don't even want to see how I'm doing. They don't even want to see my case. That's how it is here in the United States, I guess, these days.
Okay.
So,
Well, thank you for that rundown. Any closing remark?
well, I just urge folks to be steadfast in this fight against judicial tyranny we are facing. We've got a number of groups online that you can join. There's a matterofjustice.com. That's one. redressinc.org is another one. And if you want to give me a call, you can give me a call. You can contact John or Don at the number that they give for the show at the end of the show, and just get in contact with me that way. And you know, we'll be happy to work together to vote Iowa judges out, which is what our organization here in Iowa was all about.
Okay, well, thank you for that report. Now, for the people in western Iowa, we haven't had an opportunity to alert you that you can get those child abuse reports expunged from the record if you wish.
That probably
you
affects
request-
Illinois too, Nebraska too, doesn't it?
They can't do it under Iowa law.
No, but the
but
basic concept
The
is the
basic
same.
concept it would be the same, yes. Request expungement and an evidentiary hearing. Request a review of your proposed ruling from the administrative law judge. The next step, if you don't like what you get from the administrative section, you can file a petition for judicial review. This is not impossible to accomplish, but you will need to look for some assistance in doing that. Here's a couple of telephone numbers that may be of assistance to you. 276-3956 and 282-2672, and that's in area code 515. We're glad that you jumped aboard there in western Iowa. We'll see you next